New Year's is one of the great American experiences. You know, you get to put on your hat and you get to get your noisemaker and you get to drink heavily, and it's all completely framed as permitted by the culture. You gotta love it. You know, it's New Year's, and of course it's Happy New Year, and one of the things that we do that's probably one of the few noble things we do, but very complicated, is we make resolutions. Now, it's actually a very interesting thing that we make resolutions. And because resolution is just a fancy word for a promise. And promises are at the core of all cultures. Promises are at the core of how we grow. So it turns out the impulse to make a resolution is a wonderful impulse. But we need to really think about the nature of the resolutions and why is it, and we all know this, that we make resolutions with the best of intentions that last week in December. And New Year's Eve, as it's coming down, maybe we even have our parties and people are sharing their resolutions. I promise I'm going to exercise now 3 times a week, and I'm going to lose that 15 pounds between now and next year. I promise I'm actually going to, there's been books I'm going to read. I'm not going to watch TV 4 hours a night. I am going to read these 20 books that I expected to read. My resolution is, I know that fight with my family, I'm going to resolve that conflict this year. I'm going to finally give away charity the way I hope to give it away. And you know what happens? Maybe 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, I mean, it's a miracle if 4 weeks into January that resolution is even remembered, yet alone acted upon. So what's really important to ask is, how can I make the kinds of resolutions that have some stick-to-itiveness? Otherwise, we wind up just making resolutions and drowning them out in the alcohol that we drink and drowning it out in the noise that we make. So I have some very easy rules on that, actually. The first is, make a resolution that's actually possible to do. No messianic resolutions. No resolutions of transforming one's character. That's too big. No resolutions of all of a sudden looking like Charles Atlas or George Clooney. No major resolutions of somehow becoming a great student of the classics all of a sudden from being a couch potato. No great resolutions of my family's going to be the perfect family. Actually take a resolution that you think you really could accomplish. Now this is a very hard thing because one of the reasons we make resolutions that are so dramatic, it's a psychological way to actually avoid doing anything. We make the big sweeping, generalized resolution as an interior way to avoid actually the much more difficult thing of taking one step. You see, it's a lot easier to promise I'm going to go to the gym for the whole year, 3 times a day, than to say no. My resolution is that next week, the first week in January, I'm going to go to the gym. And then when I finish going to the gym that day, I'm going to ask how I feel. And if I feel better, I'm going to promise again 1 more week. It's a lot easier to promise I'm going to resolve all the conflicts in my family. I'm going to do it this year. Noble, I appreciate the nobility of it. It's a lot more difficult to say, no, by January 14th, I'm going to make 1 phone call to the uncle I haven't spoken to in 3 years. I'm going to make 1 phone call to the brother I haven't spoken to in 2 years. And I'm not making anything bigger than that. And I'm going to ask myself when I hang up the phone, how do I feel after making that call? And if I feel a little better, I promise myself to make 1 additional resolution. Now it turns out this is the Jewish, what I would call the Jewish halachic method. Halacha, which means the path or the way, it turns out it's a very incremental, step-by-step path. It doesn't say, let's get the whole Messiah to come today. What it says is, you know what? Let's start with trying to get 1 day to be a little bit better than the rest of the week. And then we call it the Sabbath. And let's see what happens if we try to carve out 1 little day before we try to get too dramatic. The halachic method, or what I call the Jewish pathing, method is one step at a time. Because it turns out it's like this. After you take one step and the step actually works to accomplish something, there's such gratification and reward that the next step becomes a little bit easier. But when we make a promise to take one giant leap for mankind in one moment, because it's impossible, by the second week in January, we're depressed and cynical about the very promises that just 3 weeks earlier we made with great nobility.